Margaery Tyrell is being forced to marry every Baratheon man who's ever seemingly lived for one simple reason, and that is that House Tyrell, her family, messed up big time. But to understand how House Tyrell messed up, we need to understand the history of this house a little bit better. So let's do a deep dive onto House Tyrell and their history and what eventually led to poor Margaery having to marry every blonde Baratheon boy ever. They're not actually Baratheons or bastards, I know, but you know, legally. Quick side note, this app might be doing that thing again where it likes to disappear, so please remember, I am right here, I post all the same stuff over there, plus there's a podcast, plus there's some like long form compilations, please, you know, go follow. Something very important to remember about House Tyrell is unlike a lot of the other major houses of Westeros, before the Targaryen conquest, these were not kings. They were not kings and queens of the Reach, they were a very minor house. And that's because the Reach was for thousands of years ruled by House Gardner. House Gardner is a very ancient house of First Men. First Men who would eventually kind of merge with the Andals and take on the Faith of the Seven and everything, but still, they're old. They're far older than the Andals. They are one of the First Men of Westeros. You get it in the name. And so where do the Tyrells come from? Well, the Tyrells descend from one person named Alistair Tyrell. He was an Andal knight, so he was, you know, not First Men in ethnicity, and he came into the service of the Gardner Kings. He became like a kind of trusted member of the household, and then his family would continue to work for the Gardners for like generations. Specifically, I believe it's one of his sons, who wasn't much of a knight himself, named Garth Tyrell, became a steward for the house. Now, a steward is kind of like a house manager. They do like kind of like the clerical work, if you would. Now, Garth Tyrell was so good at his job, he was so great in this position, that the Gardners made it a hereditary role. Meaning that Tyrells, forevermore, their job, their literally inherited job, would be to be the stewards to the kings of the Reach, to the Gardner Kings. And so that was the arrangement for thousands of years. The Gardners ruled the Reach, and the Tyrells were their high stewards. They were the ones that basically ran Highgarden, you know, the seat of House Gardner. And this is going to be an important quality in a relationship to remember with the Tyrells. The Tyrells are very, very loyal. When someone lifts them up, they remain loyal to that person, you know, as long as physically possible. So for thousands of years, the Tyrells were very faithful vassals to the Gardners. They ran their household for them. Whenever there was need of like someone in a regency, the Tyrells sometimes would be put in these leadership positions, and then occasionally like the Gardners would intermarry with the Tyrells. But everything would change when the Targaryens attacked. So as most of you will know, 300 years before the start of the main series, we had the Targaryen conquest. Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives, Rhaenys and Visenya, all decided to conquer Westeros, and that included the Reach and therefore fighting the Gardners. Now, the Gardners put up a fight. It was very brave, if not dumb. They teamed up with the Lannister kings, who were the kings of the Rock, and combined their armies and sent them after Aegon. It was like, this'll be enough to take him down, but then, you know, dragons. And so in one day, all of House Gardner was driven to extinction because fire from dragons. And so the last Gardner king, who was, I believe, Mern the Ninth, he was on fire, as were his sons, as were his grandsons, as were his cousins. Basically, everyone but one Gardner all perished in the same day, and then that one Gardner who survived that day, he passed like 3 days later of, you guessed it, burns. So with the Gardners suddenly extinct, a house who is as old as like the Starks in the North, that's like the degree of ownership that the Gardners had wielded over the Reach, suddenly they are gone, and that is wild. So after the Field of Fire, Aegon flies to Highgarden, you know, the former now seat of House Gardner, and who's there? Their stewards, the Tyrells, and the Tyrells, who now no longer have lords to follow, surrender Highgarden to the Conqueror, and says, here you go, like, this is yours now, I guess. And Aegon's like, hey, thanks for being so chill and just handing me the keys and like not making me, you know, do the whole fire thing. That's very kind of you. Do you want Highgarden? And the Tyrells are like, me? Right? Yeah, I'll take Highgarden. And so Aegon gives them Highgarden, the seat of the Reach, one of the oldest seats in all of Westeros, makes them the lords of the South, makes them the lords over all of these areas that were formerly the Gardner domain, and suddenly the Tyrells, a relatively minor house, you know, standing-wise, because they're the stewards, they're literally like the hired help, they are now the all-powerful family in the South. Now, this wouldn't be very popular with a lot of the other families in the South who were considered older and a bit more prestigious, like the Hightowers of Old Town. You have, I think, like the Florents were also pretty like, oh, we're important too. No one really liked that the Tyrells kind of got to like cut the line and become like the head honchos, but there they were. And because they had been, kind of upjumped to this high position, the Tyrells were very loyal to the Targaryens after that, like they had been to the Gardeners who'd initially raised them up. And so herein lies the issue, because 280 odd years later, you have the Mad King in King's Landing, and Robert's rebellion bursts out. And so the Tyrells are left with a decision. Do we support the Mad King, who is very clearly mad, but eventually Westeros has a way of dealing with the crazy kings, and then like a more normal one comes in. So do we like stick with the Targaryens and kind of like wait out the crazy storm, or do we join the rebels and kind of join in an uncertain future? And they choose option one. They decide we're gonna stay loyal. The Targaryens have been good to us, and like how long could Aerys live, like realistically? And then Robert's rebellion happens. Robert's rebellion plays out, and the Targaryens lose, and by extension the Tyrells lose. And so the Tyrells go from being one of the more influential houses in the kingdom, being very close to the Targaryens, and just, having all of this influence, to having very little all of a sudden. Because as one of the few major houses who did not support Robert in Robert's rebellion, he's not too keen on making them an important part of his councils, his court, etc. And so the only other major house who's kind of in a similar situation to them are the Martells. Now the issue is that the Martells and the Tyrells hate each other. They do not get along. So yes, they're both on the outs, but they're not going to find comfort in each other, because that wouldn't happen. And so for over a decade, the Tyrells are in a much more diminished position. Yes, they still have their wealth and everything, but in influence-wise, their ability to be the important players is fully gone until they try to start pushing Margaery onto Robert. And this is pretty easy to do, because Renly and Loras are now in a full-on relationship, and Loras is trying to kind of work Renly to get his family in a better position. And this isn't to say that I don't think that Loras loved Renly. I think he absolutely did. But two birds with one stone, Because all through the first book of Game of Thrones, Renly keeps trying to plant in Robert's ear that there is a very beautiful girl in Highgarden who would make a great wife if he ever needed one. It was a little more subtle than that, but still, it was a thing. Renly also kept trying to push the narrative that Margaery Tyrell looked like a young Lyanna Stark, hoping that would maybe entice Robert. He even went up to Ned at one point. It was hey, yeah, don't you think this looks like your sister? And Ned's no, she doesn't. But then, before they can follow through on this plan to have basically Robert set Cersei aside and then take a new wife, Robert, kicks the bucket. But it's okay, because we still have Margaery here, and, well, Renly could be king, and then they could marry Margaery to Renly, and again, kind of a two birds with one stone situation. Renly needs to look like he has a queen and has an interest in a queen, other than himself, and also, the Tyrells are now in. They're now in good with the next head of the kingdom, after he, wins the War of the Five Kings to get on the Iron Throne himself. But oh no, Renly has a whoops, so what do? We try to push Margaery onto Joffrey, so let's seal the deal that way, yay? But oh no, because Joffrey's also gonna have a whoops, so let's marry her off to Tommen, the toddler. He doesn't have strong opinions on girls, but he does hate beets. You can bond over that, and his love of cats and toys. So Margaery becomes a tool, she becomes a prop that House Tyrell is using to try to get back in with the head of the kingdom. Anytime there has been a king that they have been under, they have been one of their number one guys, and not being that all of a sudden has proven to be very frustrating for House Tyrell, to the point where, Margaery gets to play whack-a-mole with all the Baratheons. The metaphor isn't great, but there you go. Anyway, let me know what other houses you want me to talk about, and have a great night. Okay, bye!